Let's bring in Markos Kounalakis. He's a foreign affairs columnist for McClatchy News and visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution. He joins us now from San Francisco. Welcome, Markos. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Tanya.
Both parties may have left without signing a deal, but did they really leave entirely empty-handed?
No, I think what's happened is that, in fact, President Trump has been able to improve the situation. It's an odd thing to say when the expectations are so high that we, in fact, would see some form of a treaty or maybe even an agreement to de-escalate and to denuclearize. But the reality is things are actually much, much better than when Trump came into office. There is a dialogue now. We know that our officials can go to Pyongyang and have that discussion, even if it's at the sub-summit level. So, no, the fact that there's actually not an increase in tensions and that the tensions are much reduced from when he came into office is not nothing. It's something.
But isn't there an argument to be made here that Kim Jong-un is the one who really sort of played the president, in that now he is looked at as a world leader worthy of meeting with the president of the United States, therefore other world leaders can now meet with him, but he didn't really have to give anything up for that?
That's right. Well, he has given some things up, but you're right to say that it's not a big thing that he's given up. He is now elevated. There's no question. He's been on the big stage with the president of the United States, so anybody else would feel comfortable as well interacting with him. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. What we would want to have happen right now is for other leaders to, in fact, invite him into the community of nations, normalize the state. And as your previous piece showed, the regime is quite a brutal regime. So anything that moves him into a more normal state, into the community of nations in a way that allows him or forces him in some ways to behave in a much more civilized fashion, I think is a positive thing. The problem is we want some solutions now. We want things to look better. We want an improvement in the relations. We want him to denuclearize. But none of that came out of this summit.
Now, foreign leaders, Markos, including South Korea's Moon Jae-in and Japan's Shinzo Abe, both praised the president for walking away. What do you make of their reactions?
I think they're recognizing, Tanya, that this is just another step in the negotiation process. The president and his administration, I think, have appropriately tried to build a relationship because it is really just one leader who is going to decide everything. So everything relies on Kim. So there is criticism for the president making such an overt and public attempt to build that relationship. And of course, he's given up so many things. He's given Kim the benefit of not accusing him of the Warmbier murder, really, certainly torture and what's led to his death. But the other leaders that you mentioned, South Korea and Japan, recognize that this is just one more step in the negotiation process that allows for diplomatic processes to continue.
So one more step in the diplomatic process, but what happens next? With this summit ending with nothing fruitful, really, will there be a third summit? What might it take for the U.S. to reach some kind of long-term deal with North Korea?
Well, what's ongoing is that members of the State Department are actively negotiating with the leaders and with those who are working with Kim to come up with something. It's very clear right now that the line is being held at denuclearization, whether that's immediately or over time from the U.S. side. From the North Korean side, we're very clear about what they want. They want sanctions removed, whether they argue it's reduced sanctions or sanctions altogether removed. So once you have established those parameters of what it will take to get to a negotiated settlement, perhaps even to what I think President Trump wants, which is a peace deal and an end to the official formal declarations of war. Well, there wasn't war, but the conflict that exists with North Korea. Then I think, you will see whether or not there can be movement. And if there is movement, significant movement, then perhaps there will be that third, and I think Trump is hoping, final summit.
Right. And so, Markos, would you say then after this summit, summit number 2, does one country seem to have leverage over the other?
Well, the United States has the most leverage because it is the superpower. But I think one of the players that we haven't been talking about is China. And China has a very good relationship with North Korea. The leader of North Korea, Kim, feels very comfortable in Beijing. It is their biggest trading partner. So they are relying on cues, if not direct direction, from Beijing in terms of what it is they want to do. Now, as we know, the United States and China are currently in their own negotiation over questions of trade. How those decisions finally come about and what comes out of those trade negotiations or escalated trade war will, I think, also influence the outcome of what North Korea decides to do with the United States.
Now, Markos, as you mentioned earlier, we heard the president say he believes Kim Jong-un when the leader tells him he wasn't aware of the circumstances around Otto Warmbier's death. I want to know, first of all, what you make of that. And also, we saw the president make similar statements about, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman following the death of Jamal Khashoggi. Does this president seem to have a soft spot for autocrats?
Here's a difficult thing, is any president of the United States has to deal with bad people around the world. And that is an uncomfortable thing to recognize. Having said that, it is reprehensible that the president of the United States is giving cover to the North Korean leader, to the Saudi leader, to Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is just, the United States should stand for something more, and it certainly has in the past argued on behalf of human rights, on universal human rights. And we're not seeing that at all, really, in this administration. I can assure you, however, if anything happens to Juan Guaido in Venezuela, you can bet that it will be Maduro's fault.
Absolutely. All right. So, Markos, you have a new column coming out in the Miami Herald. The headline is President Donald Trump, Global Peacemaker. Really? You also write that President Trump may, quote, angle to win a 2020 re-election as the nation's peace president. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. It is a little bit counterintuitive, but, presidents in the past have always been recognized for their greatness for being war presidents, whether it was George Washington or Abraham Lincoln with the Civil War, FDR in World War II. Even George Bush considered himself a war president. This president has always wanted to stand outside of the traditions, and he's a rule breaker. And I think he sees himself truly and wants to be seen as a peace president. I think he wants to run in 2020 as the peace president. North Korea is one part of it. We're not at the end of the negotiations. I think he thinks that he can get to a deal that is acceptable. He is certainly pursuing peace in the Middle East. It won't happen. It won't be announced until after April 9th, after the Israeli elections. But Jared Kushner, his son-in-law and senior advisor to the White House, is actively trying to bring the region together to come up with some kind of grand bargain for the region. You see President Trump currently actively negotiating with the Taliban to come up with some kind of a peace negotiation and settlement in Afghanistan. The list goes on and on. There are lots of ways this can blow up. There are lots of problems around the world. But I really believe that he's shooting for that Nobel Prize and for re-election as a peace president, not a war president.
Well, let's see. Let's see how it shakes out. Great arguments there. Markos Kounalakis, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us.
Thank you.